Hey, Jeff Gibbons here with another Maschine Basics tutorial. So for this video, I'm going to go over patterns and scenes and how we turn that into a song. So first off, let's go over some of the building blocks of Maschine. We have groups which load sounds or instruments, and these are kind of like your tracks that you would normally have in a traditional digital audio workstation. So you can think of each group as like just another instrument that you're adding, and it's a little strange because they go horizontally instead of vertically. Let's load up a kit in group A1. So I'm going to go to the browser and load up this promise kit. And so patterns are our next building block. So let me just put in a pattern. So there's my first pattern on my first kit. Let's say I want to add a bass. I click on the next group, I press that, and now I've got another track. I can load up a bass sound. So maybe I go to sounds and then just go to bass synth, and we'll just load up that. Okay, so we've got groups here, and then we've got patterns up top. That's where your MIDI information is hiding. So if I want to see the MIDI information for my promise kit, I can just click on that pattern and I can see the MIDI information down below. So we have the patterns, we have the groups, and the last building block that you need to understand is scenes. And these scenes are like these sections of your song. As you're going through, you can just add as many of these patterns as you want, but later on we are going to check them off to include them in that particular scene. So in this little project, all I've got right now is one drum beat. I would then go on and add bass lines. So let's pretend I've got a bass line right here. We'll call this bass. And then maybe we'll add one more group and we'll say this is like a synth. And then it's got a pattern for the first section of my song. If this is the intro, I would rename this by right-clicking on this scene. I'm going to call it intro. So now it's got a name and I can see which patterns are in it. Let's add another scene and see if we can take this a step further. I'm going to click the plus button, rename this scene, and I'm going to call it verse. Let's say in my intro, I don't want the bass line. All I want is this little drum beat. So I'm going to turn off the bass line for the intro just by clicking that yellow pattern. And I'm going to turn off the synth. If you imagine I had synth in there, I'm going to turn that off on the intro as well. All I want is the drum beat. I can even rename this pattern main beat. All right. Next, I'm going to click on my verse scene, and I want the main beat in that one. I want the bass line in that one for the verse bass line, and I also want the synth to happen in the verse. I'm going to rename this pattern right here V bass. I like to organize things because you'll find that things get a little messy in the pattern section, especially if you're trying different things out and you start to lose track of what you want to keep and what you don't want to keep. So I like giving it very specific names like verse bass, and we'll call this, rename it, we can call it verse synth. And then I could go on and add another section of my song. So let's say maybe I make a chorus. I can click a new scene, I can right-click this, and I can rename it and call this chorus. And of course, you can do all of this stuff from the machine itself. So you can click the scene button, and you can see now that I've got intro, verse, and chorus. And I can click the plus button to add a new scene right on the machine. So it is fun to work with the hardware as opposed to the software. You'll find things get even quicker than just using your mouse. So turn the scenes off. I've got my 3 different scenes. Let's just remove that one. And now I've got a chorus, and I get to decide what goes in here. And at this point, I could say, well, you know what? I just want the same beat as the intro. So in that case, I just turn on the main beat, and now the main beat happens in the chorus. If I say, you know what? I want the main beat, but I want to make it a little bit more complex, all I have to do is right-click this pattern and click duplicate. Now I've got another version of that same main beat, but I can go in here and I can mangle it, or I can add some new stuff to it. So maybe I want this kind of open hi-hat, they're calling it, sound on there. So what I could do is press E to turn my sequencer arrow into a pencil or a drumstick, and I can drop in a bunch of open hi-hats on every quarter note. So let's imagine that that is my chorus beat that I want to happen, slightly different from the intro beat. I can rename that now and call it chorus beat. And now it's turned on when I'm on the chorus. If I go back to the verse, you'll see that main beat is turned on for that one. Go back to the chorus, I see the chorus beat is on. Next, I'm going to decide if I want the same bass line in the chorus. I probably want to replay something new. So I would end up with a new bass line in there, and I could call that chorus bass. And I could go on and play a new synth part and call that chorus synth. So that's how I start building up my projects. And I also will do things a lot where I'm playing in the chorus and I'll try a synth part on one pattern. I'll play something and then I won't like it, so I'll turn it off and make a new pattern and try playing something else. And I might have a whole bunch of different patterns where I'm trying things out. Just try naming the one that you choose if you want to keep the other ones as backups, or just delete them. And then you can shuffle the patterns around, move them around, and reorganize things just so you can keep track of all of the different patterns that you have on each different group. So that's kind of my method for working with the scenes and naming the scenes, and also with naming the patterns. And then you'll also notice if you look at your groups and you're on certain patterns, you can see that this pattern right here is 2 bars long. And this pattern is 4 bars long, and it's just going to keep looping over as long as that section is playing. If I were to make a section of my song, let's say in the chorus I want my chorus synth to be 8 bars long, I make it 8 bars long, and now when I press play for the chorus, every 8 bars it's going to start over for the synth, but it's going to start over every 4 bars for the bass, so it's just going to be a 4-bar phrase that keeps repeating. And then the drum kit here is only 2 bars. It's going to keep repeating every 2 bars. So that's how the different pattern lengths line up when you are in different scenes. So if your entire scene, you choose your scene to run for an entire 8 bars, the synth is going to be slightly different in the sense that it has a full 8 bars to get through, while the bass will go through 4 bars and just start again. So you don't have to worry about the lengths of patterns matching up. You can make a beat that's only 1 bar long. So double click right there, call it 1 bar long, and it's just going to keep repeating 1 bar over and over again, no matter how long you stretch out this scene for when we make the song. Those are your building blocks. We've got scenes, patterns, and groups. And just build up as many patterns as you want, but once you find the one that you want for the section of your song, give it a name so it's easy to find. Once you've got your different patterns and your different scenes chosen, that's when we're going to go over and build the song. So let me take you to another project now, and we'll build a song out of a more complex project. Okay, so here is another song. I've got 11 different groups in here. So the way that works is I've got my first 8 right here. To get to the next group of 8 patterns, so to get to A2, I press Shift. And once I press Shift, you can see there's the first one highlighted that I'm on, or the first batch of 8. And if I click to the B section here, I'm now onto my next group of 8. So A2, B2, and C2. So I can shift click, go back, and that's how I quickly get back and forth between these different groups. If you go past the 8 groups, or the 8 tracks, if you want to think of it that way, that are showing on the machine pads. So it's really easy to get to all the different groups. So let's look back at the song, and I've got an intro scene with different patterns chosen. I've got a verse scene which looks very similar to the intro, but it's got a couple more things in it. And then I've got a chorus scene that has a bunch of different patterns in it. And I've gone through and I've renamed each of these patterns so they're easy to keep track of. But let's have a listen to this intro. Okay, so there is my intro. This is my drum beat happening right here, this main kit. And then I've got some hits happening. If I want to solo them, again, I just right click on group A1. So if I right click right there, it solos it, mutes everything else. I can listen to my hits. Okay, I can right click again to take the solo off. And let's see what else I've got. I've got a bass line, a synth bass, my kit. So I right click that one. I can click on the pattern and see it down below. Press play. If I click on my verse now, I've chosen other instruments and I've gone through and I've played them and then deleted all the stuff that I didn't want. But here I've got some vibes that kick in. So let's have a listen to those. Right click. Just playing some jazzy chords in there. Right click that to take it off. Let's listen to the bass. Click on the pattern to see it. Press play. Simple little synth bass part. And then I've also got a Rhodes part in here. In this one, I'm just playing octaves. So just playing octaves on that one, doing a little bit of pitch bending. And that is living in this pattern right here, this verse Rhodes. And then I've got a couple other things. I've got some movie vocals that are chopped up.
Oh, for Pete's sake.
Oh, for Pete's sake. So this is my verse scene. And I've played stuff, I've edited things, and then chosen those patterns to appear in the verse. Next, I've got my chorus. I've got some pizzicato strings happening in there, an organ, all of those things happening in the chorus of this song. So each one of those patterns is very different from the ones that are in the verse. Now the cool thing about this is, let's say I want to add another verse. I could click in this little plus button and make a new scene and start checking things off, or I could right click this verse and go duplicate, and we're going to rename this verse 2. So in this second verse, maybe I want to make things a little bit more intense. And what I did, by the way, for the chorus is I had my synth bass, but then I made a new group that had a real bass, electric bass sound, kind of fills out the chorus. What I might want to do in verse 2 is have my synth bass, my alibi bass, also be played by the real bass. So what I can do is option drag the pattern from alibi bass over to this group. Option drag verse 1 bass to this empty slot. Now this bass is the same thing that's happening on my synth bass. If I look at this pattern, it's the same thing as this one, but it's now triggering my other group, my other instrument. So let's have a listen to that.
Oh, for Pete's sake.
So it's a little fuller, so I will right click that and rename it verse bass real. It just lets me know what's happening here so that when I click on verse 1, I can see, oh yeah, there's no real bass happening in verse 1, which I want. And then when the second verse comes around, I just want things to be a little fuller. Maybe I will add something else, maybe add some pizzicato strings in here. So let's do that. Let's add some pizzicato strings. So I go to my pizzicato strings track.
Oh, for Pete's sake. Say yes or no. Oh, for Pete's sake.
Okay, so now I've got a simple pizzicato strings thing in there. I will just 50% quantize that. I will leave that on in verse 2. So let me call this little pattern here, we're going to call this verse pizz. And now I know when I go to my first verse, no pizzicato strings are happening, but I go to my second verse, pizzicato strings are going to happen. Now that I've got these scenes built up, I'm going to go over into something called Song View in Maschine. And you can get there by either clicking this button right here, or you can just go up to View and go to Song Command 2, or you can just hit Command 1 or Command 2 to jump between those two different ways of looking at your project. So the Ideas view is where you are going to arrange your song. So the way we do that is we are going to take our scenes that we've built up and we're going to plunk them into a timeline. So we're finally going to be going from left to right like we're used to doing in traditional digital audio workstations. And what I need to do now is right click the plus button. You might want to write that down because it's easy to forget. You right click the plus button and now what we're going to do is say append intro. So I append the intro and now for 8 bars my intro scene is going to play. So if I just press play, but what if I don't want my intro to play for a full 8 bars? Then what I can do is I can mouse over the corner of this guy right here and drag it in and make it only go for 4 bars. Or if I wanted to make it even longer, I can make it go for 16 bars and it'll just keep playing. Now, the thing you need to know about this view is if you choose to delete in the song view, it's also going to delete it from the scene in your ideas view. So that is kind of dangerous, I find. Let me undo that and we'll go back and we'll see that in my intro, now that verse pie is back. Okay, so just be aware of that. You can go and start arranging things in here. I can just delete something, but it will delete it from your scene in your ideas view. It's not going to delete it from your song. The pattern is still there, but it just gives you another way to arrange things while you're over here. So now my intro, let's make it 4 bars long, and then I'm going to right click and go append verse. So I'll put the verse in there. That verse is going to go for 8 bars. Let's keep this really short just for this little demo. I'm going to make my verse 4 bars, and then I'm going to right click right here and I'm going to append the chorus. Now I've got my chorus for a full 8 bars, and I'm going to right click again and choose append verse 2, and then I'm going to right click again and choose append chorus one more time. And now don't forget that you can double click the zoom bar to see everything, or you can click and drag the zoom bar up or down to zoom in or out. And now what I've got is my intro happening, then my verse for 4 bars, then a chorus, and then verse 2 for 8 bars, and then a chorus for 8 bars, and then my song is done. Let's just have a quick listen to how this sounds. I'm going to press play.
Oh, for Pete's sake. Say yes or no.
So that's it. You build your song by taking the scenes that you've built in ideas view and then drop them into your song in song view. Now there's a whole bunch of other ways to work with Maschine, but this way seems to me the most intuitive and is very simple. So we'll go into the mixer and effects and sampling in other videos, but hopefully that gets you enough to take your pattern ideas and turn them into a song and then export it as a track to listen to. So if you want to listen to it now, of course, we go File, Export Audio, and then you would choose what format you want to mix it down as. I'd recommend a WAV file, 44.1 kilohertz, and probably 24-bit if you're going to do some mastering, or 32-bit if you're going to do some mastering, and then 16-bit if you are just going to take it out as a regular audio file and then convert it into something like an MP3. So I hope that gives you a better idea of how to take your patterns and turn them into songs. I got to say, I really appreciate all of the support that people are giving me on YouTube. It's been really cool the last 5 months getting this thing going, and I do enjoy doing this kind of stuff. I like teaching, but I also like making the music. So go to gibbonscreative.ca to see what else I do, and thanks for watching.